Greetings all, Ferrari Man 601 here. Welcome back to another 1/18th scale model car review of this, the 2005 Sauber C24 by Minichamps. Let's take a look. The Sauber C24. It's not one of the more memorable Formula One cars of recent memory, but I do have to say that I always enjoyed the look of Sauber in this era. The white, blue, and teal-green livery with some splashes of red and yellow throughout the years and alternating places on the car, it was certainly eye-catching, and I've got to say it has aged quite well as well. We don't really have too many exciting liveries anymore in Formula One. Okay, you could argue that maybe the Martini-Williams days, they were pretty cool. Certainly in this era as well, I liked the silver, black, white, and red McLarens. Of course, the Ferraris always looked stereotypically Ferrari in this era as well, but the Sauber livery was really, really cool. Everywhere you look on this car, there is a different color someplace, and it is quite eye-catching and quite pleasing overall to the eye as well. What is this car then? Well, as mentioned, it is 1/18th scale by Minichamps. It is a model, though, of the 2005 Sauber C24. This was the car, of course, that Sauber raced in 2005 in the World Championship. It was designed by Felipe Massa for Sauber, working for their very sophisticated aerodynamics department back then. And to this day, Sauber, now of course under the ownership and operation of Alfa Romeo, still has one of the best wind tunnels in all of race car design. But designed in 2005 by Felipe Massa, its immediate predecessor was the Sauber C23 of 2004, and it was immediately succeeded by the BMW F2004. 2005, Sauber's last season in Formula One as far as the pure days of Sauber and Sauber only, with the team being an independent outfit. Of course, in this era, the team also had quite a bit of Ferrari support. They ran Petronas-branded Ferrari engines. The engine in this car, of course, is no different. It is a Ferrari V10. Technical specs on the car, though. Of course, it is 2005, so we are mid-2000s, carbon fiber galore. It does have the carbon monocoque construction that you have been very accustomed to seeing in Formula One ever since really the mid-80s. Front and rear suspension, we have upper and lower wishbones and push rods activating inboard dampers in there. Right there on the front end, double wishbone push rod suspension, and of course that is the same on the rear. No pull rods really in this era. The engine, as we mentioned, yes, it's a V10. It's among the last of the class of V10 Formula One cars, 2005 being the last year where all the cars ran V10s. It is the Petronas 05A, which in reality is the Ferrari Type 053 from the 2004 season. Yes, the same engine that would have been run in the F2004. It's a 3-liter V10. The bank angle on that engine, 90 degrees. Naturally aspirated, of course, revving to about 18.5 to 19,000 RPM, putting out in this spec probably around 800, 850 horsepower. Certainly no slouch. That engine ran a Sauber designed and manufactured 7-speed semi-automatic paddle shift unit, as we saw in pretty much all the cars in this era. Renault and Minardi, though, were the holdouts for the 6-speed gearboxes in 2005. Fuel in this car, of course, as you could probably tell by the very conspicuous Petronas branding, provided by Petronas, and the tires were Michelin's, of course, the penultimate year of the Formula One tire war between Bridgestone and Michelin. Competition history on the C24 reads like this. Of course, it was only entered by Sauber in only the 2005 championship. It was driven by Jacques Villeneuve, as we see here, as well as Felipe Massa. The car made its debut at the 2005 Australian Grand Prix, and on the balance of the season, 19 races in 2005, it scored 0 wins, 0 pole positions, and 0 fastest laps, therefore no Constructors' or Drivers' Championships to speak of for this car. It's not a model that I got for its competition history. It's really just one that I wanted because it looks really cool. The car's best result was 4th place, which it did on 2 occasions, once for Jacques Villeneuve at the San Marino Grand Prix and once for Felipe Massa at the Canadian Grand Prix. Other than that, it was a midfield runner, if not running at the tail end of the pack altogether. Fairly consistent finishes in the top 15, some reasonable top 10 showings as well. 6th in Belgium for Villeneuve, 6th in Canada for Massa, 8th in Germany for Massa, 8th in France for Villeneuve, so it did get into the points on a few occasions, but remember, points only went down to P8 in 2005, so Sauber finished the season with 20 constructors' points, and that put them 8th in the standings at the end of the year after the Chinese Grand Prix. So competition history, certainly it is nowhere near illustrious when we're talking about the C24, but I do have to say, it definitely wins the beauty contest as far as 2005 goes. Now, 05, of course, it was a pretty cool year, notwithstanding the very weird and, quite honestly, incomprehensible tire rules. You couldn't change tires during the Grand Prix in this era, but this car is one of the more unique ones from that year. Of course, we had the Renault R25, the McLaren MP420, both of which were fantastically beautiful cars, but for this one, the two features that I really enjoy on it aesthetically, this engine cover. Just have a look at that very nice swooping line coming down the top of the engine cover as it goes down to the back of the topside bodywork where it starts to join up with that T-wing and the rest of the rear wing. It just looks really nice. I quite like it. And of course, the livery really accentuates all of that. I love the bright colors. I love the very aggressive lines separating the different zones on this livery. I even like that very subtle but definitely evident contrast between the green and the blue there on the side pods. Looks very cool. And of course, that particular shade of green is still seen on the Mercedes today with their Petronas branding. So yeah, some of this still remains, but none of it, of course, still remains on a Sauber, and Sauber themselves don't even technically remain in Formula One, the team now having been taken over by the Fiat Group running as Alfa Romeo these days. So the days of Sauber are well and truly gone. Of course, this car was the last of what I would consider to be pure Saubers. For the 2006 season, BMW took over the team, and the cars were then branded as BMWs after that. So 2005, really the last year for Sauber as we knew it, and of course it was the last year for this livery as well. The Sauber name would remain in Formula One. It was technically called BMW Sauber from 2006 to 2009. However, the cars were BMW designs through and through with BMW engines. After the 2009 season, with the global recession, the big manufacturers pulled out of Formula One, namely Toyota, Honda, and BMW. So the Sauber team, having been founded and still run in some part by that point by Peter Sauber himself, Mr. Sauber rebought the BMW team, rebranded it as Sauber. However, for the 2010 season, if you go back through the results, you will see BMW Sauber as an entrant. The problem was, Peter Sauber did own the team once again. He was going to save it, basically, from BMW pulling out, saying, nope, we've done what we wanted to do. We won a single Grand Prix, and that's all we want, so we're pulling out. Peter Sauber did repurchase the team, and he had control over it. The problem was he missed the deadline for submitting any new team names to the FIA for the 2010 season. So technically speaking, Sauber competed as BMW Sauber in 2010, even though BMW had no association with the team at that point after the 2009 season. So a little bit of an Easter egg. Sauber continued to compete entirely in its own name from 2011 through 2016. 2017, new regulations coming in. Sauber still on the grid as an independent privateer outfit. Again, teaming up with Ferrari for an engine supply, but the writing was on the wall. The team's in trouble. We need somebody to come in and save it. Alfa Romeo comes in. Really, the Fiat Group comes in. Yes, the same Fiat Group that owns Ferrari. They purchased what was remaining of Peter Sauber's assets, so the Fiat Group took it over, rebranded the team as Alfa Romeo. So 2017, the last year for the Sauber name in its own right in Formula One. 2018, the team gained the title sponsorship of Alfa Romeo, and for 2019, Alfa Romeo have become a complete factory outfit in Formula One, and the Sauber name is once again entirely gone. Perhaps we'll see it again someday, but with the Fiat Group being as big and successful, as influential as it is, I venture to say Sauber, as we knew it, is done from Formula One. However, they do still live on. They're still based in Switzerland. They're still building the cars in Switzerland, and many of the same personnel from these days are still in the team. So it lives on in spirit, although now on an entirely different name with some entirely different resources. And ultimately, that's just good for the team. You can achieve a lot more in Formula One when you have more money. And certainly the Fiat Group and the Alfa Romeo brand, they bring a lot of money into what was once a very small privateer outfit based in Switzerland. Very cool to see all of that. In terms of looking at this as a model, well, of course, it is a Minichamps car, and I've got to say Minichamps always do a very good job on these Formula One models. Of course, this is an older one, being a 2005 car, so it would have been produced in those days. 2005, 2006 is when these would have been on the market for new. I've found it secondhand from our favorite internet auction site, got it for a very reasonable price as well. Because it's not one of the flashier cars in terms of historical results, competition history isn't so great, they're not really in demand, so you can still find ones like these, and of course you can get them in good shape as well, as this one certainly is, and it just looks really cool. Again, I got this one simply because I loved the looks of the Saubers in this era, and I thought it would fit in quite nicely, be a little bit of a breath of fresh air in terms of going next to the other Formula One cars that we have, which more or less have some fairly drab liveries, I must say. But this one definitely grabs your attention, and it looks oh so nice in my humble opinion. Taking a look at some of the finer detail work that Minichamps have managed to do, there are the bright yellow barge boards. You can't really miss those. Front wing going by with its teal end fences, and then the blue and white on the main plane there. Great tire and suspension detail as well. The side pods, we mentioned that wonderful contrast with the green and the blue. Wonderful stuff. The rear zone comes by. There's your rear wing and the diffuser and the rain light and all that good stuff. It really is a very nicely done car, and the paint on it is also very nice. I'm not entirely sure if these small details will be picked up on camera, but when you do catch that blue section of paint with the right lighting, you will see that there is a bit of a speckle twinkle effect throughout a lot of the painted surfaces on this car, particularly the blue surfaces. And it really does stand out, and it really does look quite nice indeed. In the cockpit, obviously we have the helmet of Jacques Villeneuve in there. 2005 was Villeneuve's last full season in Formula One. He did remain with the team when BMW took it over for 2006. However, the German Grand Prix that year at Hockenheim, from which Villeneuve retired after an accident, that was the Canadian's last start in Formula One. So this was the last car with which Jacques Villeneuve competed for an entire season. And of course, he didn't win another Grand Prix after his championship year in 1997. So by this point, Jacques Villeneuve was definitely in a lean period in his career, and it ultimately turned out to be the twilight of his Formula One and basically his entire racing career on the whole. But yeah, as a subject matter for a model, if you can get a world champion in it, cool. So Jacques Villeneuve it was. We will stop the rotation here and take some closer looks at some of the technical details on the car. Having a look at the front wing, there it is. You'll notice here that we have ourselves a very simplistic design by modern standards. Single main plane with an upper flap there that's generating most of your topside downforce there. Unlike what some other teams were doing in 2005 as a loophole in the regulations to get around the minimum end fence height on these wings, they ran spoon profiles, we came to call them, where the center section of the wing dropped down below the nose tip to get the center section of the wing as close to the ground as possible for more aero efficiency. Sauber not choosing to do this, and of course, with a lot of hand-me-down parts from the 2004 Ferrari team, they kind of were resource limited in terms of how far they could develop the car. So we have a reasonably simplistic-looking front wing on the C24. But in terms of other details, taking a look here at the nose tip, some very nice decal work here from Minichamps. There's your Sauber logo front and center, the Petronas logo, Credit Suisse, the Michelin Man, Bibendum, and then of course Magneti Marelli, and then Dassault Systems. And then we get up into the car number and the antenna aerials and the pitot tubes and all things like that. There's your front suspension on this thing. Double wishbone push rod, as we mentioned. On the front end, of course, you also have tie rods for the steering, and of course you can see that the suspension elements have been treated with that carbon fiber look on all of the facing surfaces here. So very nicely done. Continuing to move rears on the car, there's the rear zone of the front suspension, the pickup points into the chassis. Then we get into the barge board detail. There again, the big yellow barge board, the principal barge boards here, with some smaller sections toward the floor, and then the initial set of barge boards that the air passes through. Again, going underneath the car, you're trying to get that air funneled toward the under tray and then spilled out around the rear side of the front tires, just trying to extract any turbulence away from the side of the monocoque. And of course, you're also trying to funnel air between the monocoque and the barge board to get it to attach itself around the side pod and then to come toward the back to feed the diffuser. Inside the side pods, you don't really get any radiator detail in there. The focal length is a little bit off, but I can assure you inside the side pods there is no attempt at any sort of radiator detail whatsoever. It's just flat matte black paint in there, but there is an opening there and a little cavity inside, so you get an idea of where the radiators would have been mounted. Toward the rear zone, of course, getting along the cockpit surround, very nice. We'll take another look at that from above so you can see that a little bit more clearly. But while we're here, I did just want to show you this small detail. Have a look at the paint here. I mentioned that there is some great paint work on this car, and I mean it. Just take a look. You see this blue section here, right? Just the rears of the radiator inlets. You notice that we have Petronas branding on a separate layer underneath that top coat of blue paint. I've never seen this on another model car before. It's really nicely done, and of course representative of what delivery really was. You kind of have to get it outside of direct light, because you see if I shine light directly on it, it's entirely invisible, but we let it go sort of into shadow again, and there it is, that Petronas branding. It's so cool, and it obviously continues all the way down the side of the side pod there. So very nice paint work, again, by Minichamps, and this is definitely some of the best paint work that I have on any of my Formula One models. So I was very, very pleased to see that little detail. We'll get it spinning again. We'll show you what's going on around the cockpit area. We'll get a better angle on all of that for you. Right in there. Very nice. Get some light in there. There's the cockpit, Mr. Villeneuve sitting in the office, and the steering wheel detail is not all that bad on this either. A little bit too close in there. Yep, there we go. So, yep, there's your steering wheel detail, as we are accustomed to seeing. Quite nice. And the shape of the steering wheel is fairly well represented. Of course, we don't really have any legible decals on it, but we do have some multicolored areas representing areas on the dashboard there behind the steering wheel, as well as on the steering wheel itself, representing the locations of different buttons for different in-car functions. The shape of the steering wheel very nicely replicated. And in addition to all of that, the steering does work on this model. A little hard to see with the lighting, but there you go. The steering on this is actually amazingly smooth. It's actually smoother than the steering I have felt on many real cars. So typically with these models, when you do get them with steerable wheels, they tend to be really clunky. They bind, or sometimes it just doesn't work at all. Or the steering rack moves, but the steering wheel isn't connected anymore. This is really, really slick. So I know it's a very minor feature, and a lot of people don't even care about it, but just thought I would point it out. Toward the rear zone of the car, you can see reasonably quiet in terms of what Sauber were doing, and certainly in terms of 2019 aerodynamics. There's not all that much going on here. We do have these little ancillary winglets just coming off of these swooping sections of bodywork. Again, these little flares, pseudo fenders almost, trying to get the air up and over the rear tires there to cut down on drag, and these little winglets here. Again, you could almost consider these to be vestiges of the tower wings. Remember those from 1998, I believe it was. They were basically mounted in the same position, but they were really high up, almost to the level of the roll hoop there where the snorkel is. So kind of a vestigial element of that, but again, the idea is just to try and create a little bit more downforce in the central section of the car. The exhaust outlets from the, don't call it a Ferrari V10, very nicely recessed into the bodywork, and then of course you can see the heat shielding just rearward of the exhaust outlets there, and we can see this T-wing. I'll call it a proto T-wing. We mentioned this on the MP420 as well. Sauber and of course Ferrari by virtue doing something very similar with their rear zone on this engine cover as well. Just a little T-wing mounted in more or less the same location as the 2017 T-wings, but a little bit lower and a little bit wider as well, just given its overall macrocosmic location on the car. The rear wing proper, there it is. Very nicely profiled, deep main plane section, as you would expect, with the little stays here just to secure the upper flap element. Of course, no DRS in this era, so everything was fixed in place once everything was bolted up in terms of car setup. But the rear wing main plane does have a carbon fiber texture on it, and it does look quite nice. The end fences as well, very simplistic in terms of the livery, just the Credit Suisse branding on top, and then just the mounting holes for fitting different flap elements in there, as well as adjusting the angles of the flap elements. Very nice. The end fences are pretty much flat in their overall profile, just a little bit of a strake there across the top profile and the rear profile at the bottom there. Very cool. Into the diffuser area. There we are. You can see that we have a little bit of almost a monkey seat wing right on top of the rain light there. This is very interesting. A few other teams were running this in this era, but the monkey seat really came into the equation in the V8 era, coming into 2009, 2010, 2011, when they were starting to play with the idea of blowing the rear zone, more so with the exhaust, initially trying to blow the top side beam wing, and then blowing the diffuser down low with the exhaust gas flow. But monkey seat in 2005. Cool to see all of that. And of course, just below that, we have the rain light, just a clear filter on that. And then we have Petronas branding and Sauber branding down there on the beam wing, white on green. Looks quite nice. Down low, of course, we have the diffuser. Very conventional diffuser design relative to what we would see in the era, but very nice. And of course, the car would be generating quite a bit of downforce in that particular region. So really cool to see all of that. And of course, you could see the rear axle as well. Quite nice stuff going on with this Sauber. And again, I've got to say, it is a very nicely put together model. Quite satisfied with it. And yeah, really very, very cool. Just wanted to come up here and show you a little bit more topside on the car, take a look at the cockpit area, get a little bit better look at the driver's suit detail. Seat belts are represented in there. They're not modeled particularly well, but there it is. The helmet design, some of the sponsorship on the suit is also visible, as well as a very minuscule Canadian flag and Villeneuve there on the suit. So there it is. You see the overall shape of the steering wheel from above there. And then, of course, all of your branding on top, Credit Suisse, the neutral button there, and then that wonderful speckly paintwork. Don't know if we're getting too many speckles there, but you can see how it would work. Very nice. And then, of course, the hatches here on the front of the monocoque here, including this very odd pentagonal hatch right there. It's a perfect pentagon there. But again, these are just hatches so that the mechanics could get in there and work on either the dampers or the pedal box in there if they needed to make any adjustments to the pedals. And of course, right here, this shut line where the nose section joins up with the front end of the monocoque, the brake master cylinders would be in there as well for more mechanical servicing. Very nice. Try to get the barge boards again. There we go. You can see the little strut that is actually connecting the principal barge board to the front of the floor. And then behind all of that, it's actually reasonably quiet. Nowadays we see a lot of aero detail going on in this section of the car, but these days it was a little bit quieter than that. So again, the design evolution of Formula One, it never stands still, and this definitely is representative of all of that. But really, I've got to say, I love the way that this paint looks. It is really, really nice. To my eye, it's a bit of a deeper blue, I believe, than what you're actually seeing on the video, because just what the camera exposure does. But it looks really, really nice, and again, application is really, really nicely put together. Everything looks the part. It's quite nice to see. So again, it's not a car that did particularly well in terms of its competition history, but I really just enjoy it in terms of aesthetics. And of course, you know, it's a Ferrari-powered car, it's a Villeneuve-driven car, and it's the last pure Sauber as far as I'm concerned. So definitely I am very much liking this one. And again, I think it was a pretty great find. It's not one that you see all that much, so I figured perhaps you all might be interested in seeing it, because I hadn't really seen one before this, so a little bit of a curiosity on my part as well. And now, just to pique your curiosity a little bit, we mentioned that the Ferrari F2004 and the Sauber C24 share the same engine, and indeed they did. What else did these two cars share? Well, of course, Ferrari, being the engine supplier and technical advisors to the Sauber team, they also supplied them with data as well as some spare parts on occasion. Taking a look at the front wing here on the F2004, well, here's the F2004, and here's the C24. Now this, of course, is a 2005 car. The F2004, obviously a 2004 car. So you'll notice that the front wing is a little bit lower on the F2004 than it is on the C24, but the overall shape doesn't look all that much different, does it? Of course, the Ferrari has a little bit of a different profile on the trailing edge of the upper flap, but the macrocosmic shape of the wing, as well as the nose cone, quite similar, I must say. Of course, both cars use a double wishbone pushrod suspension front and rear. As we move toward the rear zone, you'll see the Ferrari has narrower radiator inlets than the Sauber. Ferrari here running actually somewhat asymmetrical radiator inlets, the Sauber not doing so. But same engines in the backs of these cars and more or less the same gearboxes as well. Sauber had their own 7-speed unit. Ferrari, of course, had their 7-speed unit in the F2004, but similar. Taking a look at barge board details now, there's the overall shape on the C24. You see that open curving shape toward the trailing edge. There's the F2004's barge board. Looks pretty similar, doesn't it? Yep. Now, of course, there are always going to be similarities between Formula One cars of similar eras because, well, it's just what the regulations were. But there are some similarities that are more similar than others. Mirror placement, F2004, there it is, just ahead of the radiator inlets. They're a little bit further rears and a little bit closer inboard to the cockpit on the Sauber, but again, the family resemblance is certainly noticeable. These little winglets on the F2004 head of the rear tires, there it is on the Sauber. The rather large T-wing on the engine cover here on the F2004, and the same one in the same position on the C24. Notice the C24, they're running this T-wing at the back here of the engine cover. That is notably absent on the F2004, but it was on the F2005 and 248 F1 of 2006, we should note. Rear wing, the beam wing profile, quite similar on both of those cars as well. So again, there is some family resemblance that you can note. Probably the most interesting thing of all, though, take a look at these cars from the top. Yeah, see all of that. Got them lined up across the rear axle, and you can see that the Sauber is ever so slightly longer in its overall proportions than the F2004, but the wheelbase on the F2004 is a little bit shorter, interestingly. So, yep, definitely some family resemblance going on here, and of course that is purely indicative of the supply deal and technical support deal that Sauber had with Ferrari in this era, and of course nowadays with Sauber turning into Alfa Romeo, that is direct factory support from Ferrari and the larger Fiat group. So interesting to see all of that stuff, and of course both of these cars are very cool. We took a look at the F2004 a couple of years ago on the channel all by itself, but yeah, we see it again now in context with another derivative design pretty much. Very interesting always to make comparisons like that. All in all, though, that's what I've got for you today on the 2005 Sauber C24. Again, it's a very nice looking model, particularly just like the aesthetics of it. Of course, I also was a fan of the Sauber team in this era, and one thing that I've basically just remembered, I'd say my strongest memory of this car was at Hungary in 2005 with Felipe Massa driving. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I think it was ultimately some sort of ignition fault, but I remember Felipe Massa coming into the garage with smoke absolutely pouring out of the right bank of that engine, and they wheeled him back into the garage with the car still belching smoke everywhere. Not quite sure what they did, but they put the fire out, and then they sent him back on his way in the Hungarian Grand Prix, just basically turning it into a test session by that point. I got a little bit of a laugh as a new Formula One fan back then. I thought it was pretty cool that they would send the car back out, even though they had just experienced a pretty catastrophic malfunction by any sense of the imagination. But there it was, and yes, definitely a very cool car. Very glad that I found it as well, simply because you don't see things like this too much anymore, particularly from some of the backmarker teams, but very much like it, and again, I hope that all of you quite liked it as well. If you get the chance to find one of these, certainly jump on it if you want one, because there are not too many of them out there, and they don't really change hands too frequently anymore, particularly in good condition with the box and all of that. So if you find one, get it, because it's a very good model. Until next time, I hope that you all quite enjoyed this one. I definitely enjoyed this model very much. Until next time, I thank you all very, very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.